For me, if I could tell my younger self something, I would say that your intensity, your idealism, your strong feelings, and like some things that like you just can't let go. I don't think that those are flaws. They are an engine for what fuels me and what drives my passion, and that I don't need to apologize for caring or being soft, I think is often hyper opposed to, being strong. And I think that there is so much strength in softness as well.
Welcome to the Blue Rose Podcast. I'm your host, Becca Blue Rose, a runner, storyteller, and believer in creating a life that feels like your own. Some weeks it's just you and me, and other weeks I'm joined by women who are chasing their own version of a bold, unapologetic life. Together we explore what it really means to take risks and trust your own path. What happens when you stop trying to force your life into boxes that don't actually fit? Today we're sifting through the comparison trap and exploring what it means to live in true alignment. My guest today is Derya, a creative force in the outdoor and adventure space. We're breaking down the pressure around constant productivity and talking about what it takes to build a trustworthy crew of women who lift as they climb. If you're a high achiever who struggles with the anxious itch to constantly do more, this conversation is for you. Let's get into it.
Hi, I'm Dara, like Sarah, but with a D, just nothing like it's spelled. Just ignore the
I
spelling.
was actually wondering how to pronounce it.
I was like, don't look at any of the letters. All of them in there really don't need to be in there, but it's Dara. And then my pronouns are she, her.
Awesome. I love it. And can you tell me a little bit more about who you are, what you like to do, what fuels you, what gives you passion in life?
Yeah, man, there's so many things that fuel and give me passion. I think the outdoors and community are kind of the first two that feel like they ground me as a human. And from there, I feel like I'm also the type of person that always has like a billion different projects going on at once. Very bad at sitting still as a general like human. And so um I love going on adventures, and I love calling friends. I love leaving voice messages for friends randomly. That is a hobby, as some of my friends call it. They get like mini podcasts from me. But it's okay. I get many podcasts from them too. So it's great. It's very beautiful.
And where are you located? Are you also in Arizona? And how did you get connected with Amy?
Yeah. So, okay. I am located in Rico, Colorado, which is in Southwest Colorado, close to Telluride. I work in Telluride, but live in Rico. And I got connected very circuitously to Amy via Crystal, her partner with Red Desert Trail Camps. They are like the creators of this lovely camp. Um, and randomly, Crystal was at an event that I put on, and I went up and talked to her, and she was there on behalf of Rico Trails Alliance, which is just like a local organization focused on like all things trails in the area. But she was randomly there and started talking about this trail running camp for women and non-binary humans. And I started talking to her about it and was like, oh, that's so cool. And we kind of just connected briefly. And then I remember her posting on her story like months later that she was going to like this trail running camp in Sedona. And I messaged her and I was like, hey, like I love supporting other women. If you ever need like a photographer to come along to like help with anything, please let me know, because I just love seeing women get after it. And I love being in support of creative projects. And I randomly I didn't really expect anything from that. I was just like, "I could offer photography," and she was like, "Sure, come to camp," and I was like, "Oh, that is definitely not what I thought was gonna happen." Um, and I randomly joined them, but then have been to all of their camps since then and work as their photographer and, helping with some of their marketing at the moment. So that's how I got to know Amy and Crystal, just very randomly, but they're some of the most wonderful and incredible humans that I've met. I don't know, it's wild to see people's passions come out in such different areas, and I think even though you're good at one thing, it doesn't mean that you can't be passionate and good at a billion other things, or you can just I don't know. It's just people are just so multifaceted, and I think so different and the same, and it's just really sweet to also get to know both Amy and Crystal better, and I'm endlessly inspired by the both of them, and what they're creating and have created.
Yeah, I think that's lovely, like, I love hearing when women just want to see other women succeed just because like, for example, today I was talking to a friend on the phone and she was just so, like, excited and passionate and elated with her life, and I just couldn't feel anything but, 1, she was giving me energy, and then 2, I was just like, "You go, girl," like, I'm so excited for you, and it's such a cool experience to go from and maybe you've always been this way, but I think sometimes as young women, there is this a little bit of, like, competition almost, like, of, like, if there's only room for one of us, right? And maybe that's, like, a very young, like, teenage experience, but it's a very lovely experience when you go from feeling that way to being like, "I just wanna see women succeed, and I wanna support women in any way I possibly can."
Yeah. No, that's so sweet though. Like I definitely know that feeling when you're just calling a friend and then you're just like, "Oh my gosh, go, go, go." You're like you're doing such wonderful things and it's just like it feels like you're not in like a possessive way, but it also feels like your win. Like when
Mhm.
you're talking to friends. That's very sweet. I love friendships.
Yeah.
Um
Yeah.
but yeah, I think I don't know. I feel like it's honestly the patriarchy that is responsible for that. I think it feels like cheesy because it's all in like news cycles and social media, but I also think that there is truth behind it that it is an active resistance to also be like, screw that. I want to see you succeed. And actually, I don't hate other women. And actually, I think that there's enough space for all of us. Even if we were doing the exact same thing, we would do it differently. And I think that has been something that has shifted in myself as well from when I was younger. And I think I also grew up in a very in some areas in like my childhood, it was just, like, very stereotypical gender roles, um, in certain dynamics and in certain things that I saw, and so I think that there was I mean, the patriarchy is just so ever present through everybody's life, but I think it took a lot of unlearning to get there, but I think it's so very special to be in support of other women and other humans and just want to see them succeed, and I honestly just feel like it's like a screw you to the patriarchy when you do that because I feel like that's not what we're taught and told as like, even, like, just talking, like, heteronormatively, but it's like we're not conditioned that way. It's like we're conditioned to be pitted against other women and other people, and it's like especially I feel like in the US, it's just so hyper individualistic. I think that yeah, I often feel like it's the individual over everything else, and I think that is just a really sad way to exist. So, I agree. I think
Yeah.
that yeah, being in support of other women. I don't necessarily think that it's like a young thing. I just think it's just the unfortunate piece of existing in a patriarchal society. But I think unlearning that is very beautiful and going in a different direction is what we need.
Mhm. Well, it sounds like your meeting with Amy and Crystal was all kind of very serendipitous, like meant to happen. And so I'm curious kind of how you cultivate a life that feels aligned for you and how you kind of, I don't know, like attract things that feel for you and energetically aligned for you into your life.
That's a really good question. I was like, "Can I also ask you questions?" I was like
Yeah, you
I was like
can. You can. So some people forget that like it is kind of like it's a conversation, but like I think that it's lovely when people ask me questions, but also sometimes people don't want to, and that's okay too. So,
No, I think that's very fair. I think I automatically am like, "No, I can't ask any questions." Um,
no, you can.
but I'm curious, like, what you or, like, how you went through, like, that unlearning phase, and then I'll get to, like, your question about, how do I live in alignment or, like, how does that what does that mean to me? But I'm like, what was your experience with, like, feeling like you're in competition with, like, other women or other humans, and then, like, kind of leaving that and just wanting to see people succeed and not see other women succeed?
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't no one's ever I've never really thought about that, like, but what's initially coming up for me is, like, this I mean, I grew up in sports, and so I think when you're in sports, you're just naturally competitive and you're naturally taught, like, I need to win or I need to be better than her because if I'm not better than her, then I don't make the team, and then I think just growing up always in sports in college, and then when you get to college, I also think about, like, grades a little bit, and it's like, well, I wanna be the smartest and the best, and I think it's when you start learning that you don't have to be on the same path as everyone else and that your journey is uniquely your own and that you get to make decisions that feel good for you, and not every decision that feels good for you will feel good for the person next to you, and it's like, no matter what, even if, like you said, we're doing the same thing, say we're both, photographers, it's like, well, I have a specific niche over here and you have a specific niche over here, or maybe, like, you see something that I don't see, and it's just like, even if you're on the same trajectory, you have a different path in getting there, you have a different lens on life, you have a different perspective, and I think once I started to learn that, I was like, oh, like, we're all different and unique and beautiful, and everyone deserves space and a place to succeed, and there's no competition, there's only, like, lifting people up, and then I also think maybe it was when I stopped attaching myself to outcomes, when I was like, "Oh, like, if this thing doesn't happen for me, then it's maybe not meant for me, and if it happens for her, it was meant for her, and that's awesome and aligned, and I am happy for her," and it's just this, like, acceptance that maybe not everything in life is for me, and the things that are for me will find me, and the things that are for you will find you, and just trusting that process a little bit.
No, I love it. I feel like that's extremely impressive. I find for myself that I still experience a lot of resistance when it's like I really want something. I think it's hard to pull back or to just, like, take that perspective of, like, more of, like, a fluid outlook on the world. I think that's a very beautiful perspective that you have and have come into, and I think it's definitely, like, a skill and a lot of, like, work on yourself as an individual to also get to that space to be like, everything that is aligned will come to me, and if it's not aligned, it's not aligned. I think that is a very beautiful headspace to exist in. I find myself I it's hard for me to get there, I think, with things that I really want, but I admire that headspace a lot.
And I'm not saying it's not, like, hard sometimes, like, definitely there are things that you're like, "I worked really hard for this, and I want it, and, like, why would this not be for me?" kind of thing, because you're like, "I want it so bad, and I just, like, have this vision of, like, what it will be and all the things," and so it's definitely hard to separate that. Yeah, I don't know, say you don't get something that you want, maybe it's just a better not a better, but an easier way for me to cope with not getting it. It's like, okay, I'm accepting that this is not for me, and that way I can move on easier instead of getting stuck. Because sometimes I do think it's, at least for me in my experience in the past, like, I could, like, ruminate on, like, what did I do wrong, or why did I not get that thing, or, what could I have done better, and sometimes I just don't feel like, that's a great space to be in sometimes, but then sometimes I think it's not a productive space for me because then I feel like I can't move forward.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. But yeah, you're very incredible in the way that you're like expressing all of these things. And I don't think it's also the easy way. I'm like, I'll push back on that for you. I'm like, I think that's a lot of work to be in that headspace and not in like a bad way or it's like a negative
Yeah.
with the association with work, but it's like it is a lot to just like um also experience life as it comes in waves and not in like a complacent way, but in a very active way. And I think being able to release something, even if it's like, hard sometimes, I think that's a very like wonderful place that you're able to get to. Very inspirational.
Mhm. Well, thank you. I
Yeah.
appreciate that. It was so fun to be asked a question.
I'm like, "Wait, I wanna know your your answers to all this." Oh,
Oh.
thank you. Okay, so you asked, "What does, like, kind of living in alignment mean to me?" Um,
Mhm.
just know that I have the same question for you after I answer.
Sounds good, sounds good.
I think it was really sweet, like, that you sent over some questions just because, honestly, they were all really great journal prompts and just, like, points of reflection. So, thank you for that in general. Um, I find that, like, living in alignment, I guess, for me means that I'm a part of the world around me and not separate from it. I think oftentimes I think the rhetoric is certainly changing, but whether we're talking about nature or community, I think it's often like humans are like considered separate. And it's like I think to be a part of something means that, you know, and not to get like very dark, but like all the horrific atrocities that are happening and like to both my fellow humans and to the natural environment, I do feel like it should impact me. Like I feel like that's a fair piece to have. And I think that all of that means just, like, actively pushing for the creation of something better, and it's like, I think you have to feel the weight of something not to let it hold you down, and I think, like, back to even what you were responding to, I think there's a certain piece of if you just ruminate on every single piece, whether it's, like, in your own life of failure or if you ruminate on every single piece of, like, all the different pieces that are happening or all the different things that are happening in the world, it's overwhelming, and I think for me, it can feel like potential for stagnation or, like, not to be able to do anything, and so I think it's a f living in alignment feels like a healthy dose of, like, educating myself, understanding what is going on in the world, and also not being complacent, understanding, like, the systems of power and oppression, and also understanding where to invest my resources and time, but also, like, giving myself, like, rest, and I feel like feeling joy too is, like, a huge piece of being able to move and to push for systems of change, and I think I try as best as possible not to just, like, take the status quo and, like, be like, "Oh, that's good enough." But it's like, I want to actively push for change, but I think in doing so, you also have to give yourself rest and you have to give yourself joy, and it's like, how can I be a better human for myself, for my community, for the world around me? Really just caring about the person next to you or, like, further the next to you, and also just, like, the natural world. I think it's just it can be dialed down to that simple phrase, I guess, for me is it's just, like, caring about the spaces you exist with and the people around you, and I feel like that feels in alignment, and it's like I do it so imperfectly every single day, um, but I think that that is kind of what gives me energy is just to feel in community with other beings.
Mhm. I love that. That was a very beautiful answer. This is a question that I asked you, but I do think it's something that I've been thinking about a lot recently is like, how can I be more intentional with the spaces that I am in? Because trail running for me is like, it's my favorite thing to do. And oftentimes I find it's no, I don't think it's a selfish hobby, but I find that sometimes I am selfish in the hobby, like, where I know that it brings me so much peace and joy, and it connects me to nature, and I am out there for hours, and it's amazing, and I can hear the birds and the wind, and every time I enter water, I pray, and I, like, thank God for this moment that I'm in because I love water so much, like, I am a water child, and I'm just like, "Thank you for this," and, living in Utah too, who knows how long the water's gonna be here, and so, like, in that way, I'm like, "This is not selfish," is like, "This is amazing," but then I think of that friend that I mentioned to you and how, he's spending an entire week of his own personal time rebuilding trails in, like, Southern Utah and going down and helping just be, like, a steward of the land, and that's really got me thinking of, like, well, what am I doing? Like, I recreate on these trails all the time, and I'm in these spaces, and yes, I appreciate them, but, like, what am I doing to actually nurture them and, like, keep them growing? And so when you say, like, yeah, like, living in alignment is, like, thinking about the spaces that you're in and connecting to them, I think that that's just something I've been thinking about a lot recently, and how I personally can be less selfish with the spaces that I am in, and not just think about me in those moments, but also think about, like, okay, but, like, what am I contributing to this water and, like, these trails?
Yeah, I think that's a beautiful reflection. I also don't think that it's like your existence on those trails is just inherently selfish. I don't feel like just being there is selfish. It's not like you're separate from the experience, even when you're talking about water. Also, did you grow up around water? Like, I was like a random thought. I was like, or do you
I
just
did.
like drawn to it in general?
Both. Yeah,
Both.
like, I grew up in Bend, Oregon, and
Oh,
so,
okay.
like, just lakes and rivers, but then I was a swimmer growing up, and I think that was just, like, just loved being in the pool, and then as I've gotten older, it's just, like, there is no place in the world that makes me feel as happy and connected as water. Like, if I could enter water, like, every day, all the time, I would just be there. That would be what I did.
That's very special. Do you have, like, a specific, like, water that you're drawn to?
Definitely alpine lakes. Like, I definitely feel more drawn to natural bodies of water. I know that reservoirs are I don't know, something about them being man-made, like, it's does I still love them, but something about just, like, natural running bodies of water, and I also love the ocean, though, but I definitely feel more called to, like, lakes and, like, ice cold ice cold water. So,
That's very fair.
waterfalls, like, yeah,
Of
anything
course.
really.
No, I think it's so interesting to, like, hear about what people are connected to with the land. One of my friends feels immensely connected to, like, dense forest, and for me, that's not the case. Like, I feel very connected, and it's not like I don't feel great in dense forest, it's just, like, I don't know, I feel, like, a sense of, like, peace in, like, the high alpine, and I'm like, I also, like, you know, grew up in the mountains, and I'm like, so it's really fascinating, and it's like, I think it's a important piece also to, like, acknowledge of, like, the re-indigenization of, like, our thought processes, and I think that's kind of, like, what you were talking about um, with wanting to do more than just recreate, but I don't even like the term, like, do more or, like, in tandem with, um, being in these spaces to recreate, you also want to, like, give something back, it sounds like, to the land, and I think that is a very like, to the land or community or however you feel like you're describing it, and I feel like that's a very beautiful, way of thinking, and I think it's important to have those thoughts, and it's like I also yeah, I think it's just interesting also to see where well, like, what and how people feel connected with the land, and when you're talking about, like or when I, like, think about re-indigenization, it's like, are people inherently drawn to, like, different landscapes, or is it just because you grew up in a certain area? And if you grew up in, like, a city, it's like, do you feel more, like, called to, like, alpine lakes or, like, waterfalls or oceans, or do you feel more called to, like, high alpine? It's just really interesting to think about what that connection is, because it's like, I do feel like that almost like it feels like a higher connection with the high alpine, and I don't know why. Um,
Mhm.
but I think it is interesting because I have had the conversation with other friends who, just talk about different areas in nature where they do feel like that, like, deep connection, and it's just interesting that it's so different for every single human, and it's sweet that yours is alpine lakes. I think alpine lakes are very beautiful and also very cold
Yeah.
too.
Yes, yes. And and to also comment on the do more, and I guess, like, yeah, I wouldn't say that that's the feeling, like, it's because I think that there's also, like, the other half of that that's kind of like, we're trying to learn, especially, I think, as women, and I know personally, we're trying to learn, I don't need to be productive or be doing something in order to be worthy or to be successful or whatever it is, right? It's like this feeling that you can just exist. Like, I can just exist in an alpine lake and be like, this is enough. I am doing enough. I am rejuvenating myself and I feel good. And that's all that matters. But then yeah, it's more of like a giving back, not feeling like, yeah, maybe not trying not to feel like I need to do more, because I think that's a constant experience, and maybe that's what you were kind of getting at the beginning when you said maybe you have a hard time sitting still, is I think as women, we do sometimes feel that, like, and maybe that's obviously a male experience too, and whoever, like, it could be just a natural human experience, but I think some people have an easier time resting and than others. And I know that I am someone that has a harder time, like, sometimes I feel like I need permission to rest.
Yeah. No, I do feel like with like I especially like heteronormatively too, it's like I do feel like there is the sense of like I mean there's a reason why it's also made fun of too, and it's like there's a reason why that like a man can do something, a woman can do the same thing, but it will never be enough when the woman does it. And it's like I know that's like broad generalizations, and we're just specifically talking about heteronormative genders and that, but it's like I do feel like that is the case if you're existing as, like, a non-cis het man, non-cis het white man. I feel like there is the sense of, like, this society wasn't built for you, therefore you are not good enough, you are not productive enough, you are not et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and it's like, I think there's a piece of that to where it's like it feels very unfair to not be able to rest and not to be able to just exist as you are and that be enough. And I do agree that it's like I think just being as you are should be enough. And I think living in reciprocity is also a piece of that, but it doesn't mean that you aren't enough as you are. I think it just means like if you're acting in community, if you're acting for like the good of humanity, if you will. It's like you also think about other people, and I think it's also often associated with being, like, a woman or, like, it's also, like, a caregiver, and I was like, I don't think that that is or should ever be attached to a gender. I think that it's like you can be enough and you can care for other people, and I think those are separate and together at the same time. But it's like I do think that for me, yeah, I'm definitely sure that the piece of, like, not being able to kind of be still comes from that. And also I think for myself, I have, like, a very just, like, active brain, and it's like I have a lot of anxiety, and so for me, it's like sitting still is definitely harder than being active, and so it's like I feel sometimes, like, for the reverse, it feels like a lot of, um, time and energy to just be still is, like that's a lot harder for me than to just be, like, constantly on the go in the I don't know what your experience is with that. Like, do you feel, like, similar in the sense of, like, you said you almost feel like you have to ask for permission, but do you feel like you just feel, like, inherently like, "Oh, I need to go, go, go," or do you just feel like it's stemming from, like, "I don't feel like I am, like, good enough," or whatever, and that's, like, where the root of it is, like, for yourself?
I think that there's, like, 2 parts to that, because I think sometimes I feel like it's because I'm not enough, and sometimes I'm like, I need to prove myself, and I think that that feeling often stems from comparing myself to other people, where I'm seeing what other people are doing, and, for example, someone else could have a podcast, and it could be, like, way more successful or whatever, and whatever success is whatever definition success is for you, it's like, well, from the outside perspective, to me, it looks like that. And but then I have to take a step back and be like, but that's not my goal with my podcast. Like for me, the goal is to share women's stories and to show women that like there's all these women out here doing life in the way that feels good for them, and that's awesome, and that's my goal. And so if from that perspective of like comparison, I think sometimes I feel like okay, I have to do more because I'm not enough in comparison to this person. But then I think when I'm, like, truly grounded and I know how I'm feeling and I'm in tune with my body, I think I just am a very active, like, I love just moving my body in whatever way that looks like for that day, and I feel like I rest when I need to rest, and I move when I need to move, and so I have a hard time being still, but then it's like maybe I have 3 weeks where I'm like, "Go, go, go." I feel amazing, and I'm just like I'm doing all the things and I'm moving my body a ton, and then I come to, like, a few days where I'm just like, "Wow, I just need complete stillness." And I find that when I'm feeling like I need stillness, I'm really good at being still and I'm really good at resting, but if I don't feel like I need it, well, then I'm just terrible at it because I don't like to feel like I'm resting when I don't need rest, and I don't know, there's a quote, "There's no sense in resting when you feel like you need to, like, dance among the stars, and likewise, there's no sense in momentum when you feel like you need to rest," or something like that. Like, she says it a lot more eloquently and, like, beautiful than what I just said. Um,
Oh, I like that. That was great.
yeah, but something like that, and I feel like that feels very aligned for me, where it's like if the momentum is there and I feel good, then I'll keep moving, and if I feel like I need stillness, then I will pause.
Yeah, I feel like that's I feel like I can definitely relate in the, like, not feeling good enough and, like, the comparison piece. I feel like that's a really hard, aspect, and I think especially being on social media and having so much access to people doing maybe similar things as you, I think it's hard, at least for me, um, to get out of my head sometimes, but it's like I feel like I have, like, a couple of mantras that I have, and I was just curious if you have, like, any I don't know, maybe mantra isn't the best term, but it's, like, any word or any, like, phrase that kind of, like, brings you back, because I think that it is a really hard piece, I think, especially existing in the world that we do exist in today, and I'm like I think comparison is just a very challenging piece of existence, and I think it can be, like, good in certain ways, but I think more often than not, it feels more draining than, like, life-giving or, like, pushing towards something. I think comparison and inspiration feel very close, but very, like, extremely different in how they show up in my body.
I I don't know if I have a mantra, but I mean, a mantra that I do have for myself is I say this to myself, like, probably every single day, and it's like, "I am smart, I am beautiful, and I can do this." Um, and that's just, like, consistently in my head, but then sometimes I think that I more so ask myself a question, and it's, "Is this for me or is this for them?" And that's kinda maybe how I separate myself from, yeah, like you're saying, comparison or inspiration. Like, I love getting ideas from people, and obviously, like, inspiration is essential. It's how we get inspiration from nature. We There's so many things we can draw inspiration from, but then it's, yeah, when I'm feeling like I'm maybe comparing myself, it's like, am I seeing this, and is it for me or is it for them? Can I tune out? Can I put my phone away? Can I go on a walk, and can I ground myself in, like, that question and just be like, Is this something that I actually want in my life?" Because it's so easy to take on other people's goals and other people's interests as your own, and that's also, like, there's a difference between being curious and then just completely doing things that don't feel aligned for you, but you feel like you should be doing because someone else is doing them.
Yeah. No,
What
that's
is your mantra?
man. I feel like I like the same. I love how I asked you a question. I don't have like a specific answer, so you're so welcome.
That's okay.
But I think it's like similar to it's like more so a mindset. I think that I also I think I I often am like we all have something like we're all so different and we're the same, but I think like grounding myself in the piece of like if I'm comparing myself to somebody else, it's I kind of, like, reframe it of, like, how am I inspired by this person? Because I think often, like, whatever the comparison that can stem into jealousy and all of those pieces, I feel like stems from a place of, like, insecurity and a place of, like, the ego kind of taking over, but it's like, if I can take a step back and I think meditation honestly helps me so much as a human. Um, and I think taking a step back from that ego-driven response and just being like, "What am I actually inspired? Like, why is this person inspiring me? Why is this person on my mind?" And then just being like, "Well, nobody wants, like, cookie cutters of people, and it's like there can only be one like you, and it's like, while I do believe we exist in community and that we are very similar, I also feel like there's really beautiful parts of, like, each and every one of us that are so unique and special to us as humans that it's like I kind of go back to that to where it's like trying to see it for inspiration. I also think stepping away from my phone is very helpful because it's like I think that is where I feel the most in comparison with other people rather than in day-to-day life. And I think when I can reframe it as questions to myself of like, well, like what's inspiring you about this person? I think then it takes it away from like this person is like doing something I want to do or like somebody like I can like reframe it to where I'm like, "Oh, I love who I am as a person and this person's inspiring me to do this or to do this." And I think that that's been really helpful, but it is like I think acknowledging for myself when I am in that space that it's like, A, I probably need to step away from my phone for a little bit, and B, like, y as opposed to going to the negative, which I feel like in my brain, it's very easy to do. I think I always tend to think of, like, worst case scenarios as opposed to, like, best case scenarios, and I think when I can reframe and work with my brain to not everything deserves a positive spin, but I think when I can reframe it as, like, where are you finding inspiration from this person or this being or this, like, movement, however, whatever the comparison is stemming from, I think that really helps take it in a different direction.
Yeah, that's something that I do. Actually, I like will journal and I'll write down like I guess I maybe not comparison, but sometimes I'll ask myself like, "Hey, like who are you jealous of?" And I get that the same where it's like oftentimes in real life I'm not like jealous of people, but then when I'm on my phone, I'm like, "Oh, I'm like jealous of her and I'm jealous of her." Um but then I kind of tried to also reframe it and ask like what's the energy that I'm jealous of? And like oftentimes if I go through and I'm like I list 5 women that I'm like, "Oh, I'm jealous of her." And it's like, "Okay, why am I jealous?" And a lot of the time, like, for me, it's like at least the perception of freedom as an energy, like, that is something that I like because I value my freedom and my choice to do what I feel aligned to do, and I value, like, adventure, and so sometimes when I see people, it's like, okay, like, yeah, like, what is the energy and what specifically and oftentimes the 5 people have, like, the same thing in common that I'm, like, finding myself being jealous of, and it's like, okay, like, how can I find that in my own life without, like, uprooting and changing everything and feeling like I just need to become a whole new person overnight. It's just like, where can I find that in my life and what I'm already doing?
Yeah. No, I think that's really, like, um, a beautiful outlook, and I also think that it is human to compare or to have, like, jealousy, but I also think that it's more like, I feel like it's all most every single time I experience that, it's just a reflection of myself and where I'm at, and I think the more that I understand myself and I understand, like, even, like, if we're talking about mental health, it's like I understand where I'm at as a human, the more space I have for all like, iterations of myself. I think I become more constricted, like, it almost feels like the more that I learn about myself and the more that I care for my mental health and well-being, the larger the space I have to show up for other humans, but the less, like, comparison I feel, the less jealousy I feel, because it is, I feel like, just a reflection of, like, your inward being, and it's like it's also something that I struggle with on, like, a day-to-day basis, and so it's like, but I do find it's like the more that I can, like, peel back the layers of myself and understand myself, the more space I have to be a better human, and I think for me that also, like, alleviates that, like, tension that I can feel sometimes.
Is there something that you do to kind of keep learning about yourself and, like, keep growing and moving forward?
I think for me, therapy has been, like, a huge part of my life for a long time. I think it was very consistent for about, like, 6 years, and then it's kind of been, like, a little bit more, like, I've ebbed and flowed from therapy, but I do find, at least for me, I don't think it's for everybody. I think that having an an outlet or someone to talk to beside, like, your friends, your close humans, your loved ones, I think is helpful as, like, a general piece, but I also am like, it doesn't it my way of doing things doesn't work for everybody, but it's like I think I find that having therapy in a regular cadence in my life has drastically improved my overall mental health, well-being, self-reflection, and understanding, and I think it's just and also compassion for myself, but also not, like, um, staying stuck or, like, taking how I act as, like, the status quo, and that's how I'll act forever, and I think that has been a huge part of the shift that I've seen, and I think it feels like before I was in therapy, I would go into, like, certain friendships and dynamics with the desire for somebody to help, like, fix my problems, and I think after being in therapy, it's like I still go to my loved and trusted humans with all the shit that's happening in my life, but I think it's less of a, like, "You need to fix this," versus, like, connecting on a human level and also trusting that the people in my corner will call me out, but will also, like, be my safety net, and I think that's the sign of, like, a very healthy support system is it's like, you should feel like you can do anything, but you should also feel like if you do misstep, your humans will be the first ones to tell you, which I think is very, very beautiful, and I feel very grateful. But I think movement also helps. It's like I think it's a piece in my toolkit. I don't think that movement equals a sign of being healthy. I think movement with self-reflection and understanding is a healthier association for both because I think that I think a lot about this is I think living in a mountain town too, where often there's like this extractive and very like dominating rhetoric used surrounding the natural areas where you're like, I'm gonna conquer a peak or I'm gonna do this. And it's like, that'll make me feel better. And like the mountains are like my medicine. And you're just like, well, it helps. But like also, you need to, I think all of us as humans need to have an understanding or like develop an understanding for who we are as people. And I think that's an ongoing process and ever changing, and I don't think I'll ever have, like, the exact answers, but I think what does what I do come back to is it's like, ultimately, I just really want to be a better human, and I want to show up and be able to show up for the people that I love and care about, and I also want to be that person that makes like, makes people feel valued and special, and it's like, that is such a grounding force for me, and it's like I find when I'm noticing, like, the small things, even if I'm, like, moving or out on a run and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, like, the aspen is, like, budding," and I see, like, a little bud, I'm like, "Oh, I feel more in tuned with the world around me," and I think it's it's those small things, it's, like, untangling all the pieces of myself but also showing up and noticing, like, the small things that might go unnoticed on a day-to-day basis for me and for other people.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, something that stuck out that you said there was just like the dominating rhetoric of living in a place like in a mountain town. Because I mean, I'm in Salt Lake, and I think that's something that I also think about a lot is like the difference between just like being able to move your body because you love to and playing in the mountains because you love the mountains, and then this culture of like get after it, do it as fast as you can, do it as hard as you can. And I think there's a place for both. Some days I'm like, yeah, I want to push myself and like see how fast I can do this. But then I sometimes leave those experiences feeling a little like I feel like I missed something about nature that day, or like I wasn't as connected, or sometimes I'll have my headphones in and then I'm like, well, I didn't even, like, hear the birds, or I didn't, like, and
Well,
then there's the days that I go out just for the adventure, and I go out with a friend, or it's just for fun, and it's like there's such different experiences, and holding space for both and finding a balance for both can be a little challenging, um, but I definitely think that the experience of, just going out into the mountains and moving your body and just for joy, at least for me, helps me feel a lot more at peace and grounded than the other version.
yeah, no, that's very fair. What what else do you feel like brings you that peace and grounding, and, like, how do you come back to, like, your center when there's, like, a lot of chatter?
Water. I mean, like, I know, like, it sounds funny, but, like, there are days where I will like, the reservoirs are about 45 minutes away from me, and there are days where, like, it's like I am grumpy or I feel out of alignment and I feel like I don't know what I need. The answer is just always water. Like, if I like, my demeanor and, like, mood and energy from just driving up to the reservoir, taking a cold plunge, being with water, and, like, sitting there for, like, even 20 minutes, like, probably even 10, is enough to just, like, completely change my entire day, week. Like, it's pretty incredible how I'm very in tune with, like, touch, is my, like, sensory, like, the thing that's, yeah, like, it's not like hearing or seeing or taste, it's like, for me, it's touch, and just, like, the feeling of, like, water on my skin, so it's like, even if I can't make it up to a reservoir, like a bath or a shower or, even rain, like, if it's raining, I will choose to go for a run or a walk because I just love water on my skin, um, so for me, it's definitely that, or if there's no water available to me, because sometimes it's just not possible, um, definitely, like, meditation is, like, my
Mm.
second go-to of, like, deep breaths and just, like, what is 5 things I hear or 5 things I smell or touch or
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
If you could give your younger self a piece of advice, what would it be? And is there a piece of advice that you've received in your life that has stuck with you?
That's such a good question. Um, I feel like for me, if I could tell my younger self something, I would say that your intensity, like your idealism, your strong feelings, and, like, some things that, like, you just can't let go, I don't think that those are flaws. I think that there are pieces of that, of course, it's like you can, you know, build your toolkit to relate with them in a healthier way, but I also think that they're also an engine for what fuels me and what drives my passion, and that I don't need to apologize for caring or being soft, I think is often, um, hyper opposed to, being strong, and I think that there is so much strength in softness as well, and I think, man, I feel like I receive wonderful advice on a day-to-day basis from all of the amazing humans in my life, and especially all of the women in my life, and I think one thing maybe that has come up, I don't necessarily think that it's, like, you know, the advice that I've ever received, but I think it's one that's come up more often than not, and it's just, like, don't be afraid to lean on your support systems, and I think when when I think of, like, myself, I'm like, "Oh, I don't wanna be an imposition, or these feelings might be too big," and it's like, I think often when I talk to my humans, I want them to share the vulnerable pieces, and I think that's how, like, community is built. I think it's based on being vulnerable, and I think it's based on authenticity, and it's, like, that also means showing up in all the different varieties of who you are as a human and all the different variations that happen on day to day, like, month, year by year basis, and I think that finding the people that support you, but also push you to be a better human is one of the most beautiful things to experience as a human. And so I think I'll just kind of like wrap it up with that. But I would love to hear your like advice that you like the best advice that you've received. And if there's something like that you would want to tell your younger self.
I knew you were gonna ask me, and it's funny because no one has ever asked me that, and so it's, like, funny because you would think by now I would, like, have my answer ready to go. Think that I would tell my younger self that you can be independent and have community at the same time, because I think that I kind of had this, like, hyper independent mentality for a long time because I felt like there was a lot of things that I wanted to do, and by having community, I felt like it might slow me down or change my mind, or people might tell me, like, "You shouldn't be doing that," and I think that at that age, I was kind of I think when you're younger, you're a little bit more malleable to what people's opinions and thoughts are, and so I think I was very protective of myself and my energy, and I was like, "I'm doing what I wanna do," and I think that as I've gotten older, I'm like right now I'm like hyper focused on building community because it's not something I spent a lot of time thinking about. And so even just like with friendships that I had when I was in high school and in college, I'm just trying to figure out how to like be more intentional with them and actually nurture those relationships that I kind of like let fall to the wayside because I was like, I just got to do me. And I think that there's a way to do both because especially now I'm figuring out like you can have a beautiful community and friends and still do all the things that you wanna do. Um, so that would be my advice to my younger self. Um, and the best advice I ever received, I think that probably that this is kind of probably what I touched on already, but I think that the idea that, like, things will always be there for you to come back to, so don't be afraid to move forward and to try new things, whether that be, like, a job that you have. Like, I was a barista for a while at a coffee shop, and I think I get really comfortable and happy and I love it there, and then it's kind of like there's almost this fear of moving on and what's next, and I think that it's like, well, if I wanted my job back there, I probably could go back and get it in a year or 2 if I wanted to, like, it's and I'm not saying that everything will be there for you, but just kind of the idea of, like, one door closes, another one opens, and you can always go back to what you were doing before, but why not open the next door and see what's there, and if you don't like it, okay, then choose something else, and if you love it, then maybe you're on the right path.
Yeah, I think that's beautiful.
Thanks for listening to the Blue Rose podcast. If you love this episode, please hit follow, leave a review, or send it to a friend who's building their own bold life. Keep trusting yourself, and I'll see you next week.